UFC London over the weekend. A lot of different fights you could have talked about, but the one that I thought was the most interesting for a lot of different reasons, of course, let me turn it this way, was the main event. Jorge Masvidal defeating Darren Till in the main event. Now, what was significant about the win? Well, number one, snapped a 2-fight losing streak for Jorge Masvidal. That's big. That's now 2 fights in a row that Darren Till has lost. I think some of his stock has probably dropped, understandably, a little bit, although his future is still very much open for interpretation, and especially if he goes up to middleweight. I'll know the story there. Now, what stood out to me was a couple of things. Now, Jorge Masvidal is one of these guys who came up on the sort of Kimbo Slice circuit, literally fighting in backyards in Miami, and he has elevated himself to this position. He has had, I think, 5 split decision losses. No, 5. He's had at least 4 split decision losses in his career. He is a guy who everybody you talk to that trains with can't say enough good things about him. I spoke to Anthony Rocco Martin last week, and he was like, dude, training with that guy is a nightmare. I mean, it's good for you, but it's a nightmare. And everybody else would be like, his ground game is so good. His stand-up is so good. His wrestling is so good. His cardio is so good. And then you look at his record, and it's definitely good, but you're like, that doesn't exactly match the rhetoric. I think there's been a couple of problems in his career. I don't know how much fighting at lightweight, as long as he did, benefited him. I think that's part of it. Again, there's been a couple times where he really needed to step on the gas in fights, and he didn't. There's been a couple times where I thought he could have got the nod, and he didn't. There's just been a couple of things here and there that have held him back. I made a claim on Saturday after he knocked out Darren Till, and I really stand by it, which is Jorge Masvidal, in my judgment, is easily, in terms of the casual audience being aware of who's really good in MMA, it's easily Jorge Masvidal. Some folks are saying, what about Leon Edwards? Certainly Leon Edwards' ability doesn't quite match his visibility, but that's all relatively recent. We're talking about a guy who has been doing this for a long time. 34 years old, and he's been fighting since he was in his teens, right? And he's always had these moments of build-up and then it didn't work, and then build-up and it didn't work. And again, some of that was his fault, a lot of it wasn't. And so you're talking about a guy who has been consistently, not exactly underperforming, but underperforming relative to expectations or some kind of in-between. He's been doing good work. It just wasn't really recognized, and I think that's my point. It's been ongoing for a really long time. So I thought that was a moment, I don't know if you want to call it a breakout moment. It's arguably his best win. It's certainly his biggest win in terms of the last few years. The Cerrone win was nice, but it's hard to know exactly what that means today. He did lose to Wonderboy Thompson pretty consistently and clearly. It's the same with Demian Maia as well. This was not really a rebound win. This was him showing that for all the talk about 3-piece and a soda, for all the talk about him fighting in backyards, for all the talk about Jorge Masvidal being the tough guy who doesn't take anything, and all those are true statements, the reality is, man, he is a really, really, really masterful technician. He doesn't get enough credit for it, as I mentioned, for all those reasons. But if you look at the tape and you just watch the reality of it, he's not beating guys like Darren Till in the way he is by accident. So today's lesson is not merely about how Jorge Masvidal won, nor am I trying to dissuade you about your opinions related to him, about him being these tough guys who don't take a lot of crap and that kind of stuff. I'm not challenging it. What I'm saying is he almost has this compartmentalized identity, where on the one hand, he is the street tough guy, and on the other hand, he is the really thoughtful, cerebral fighter. Most of the guys who start out fighting in backyards, they don't ever become anything because that's really all they're good at. This guy turned out to be really good at the sportsman's game and yet has maintained this posture of a guy who, he's always getting he's a tough dude from the Kajay, man, from the street. That's who he is. But he's both. All right, so let's go to the slide. Now, there's something in here which we're going to focus in on, the double shift. Shouts to commentator John Gooden. He noted that Jorge Masvidal had borrowed something from Tyron Woodley in terms of that double shift. We'll talk about that. He's right. I don't know if he borrowed it, but certainly they both do it. And in fact, though, I would argue that there's another person that they omitted from the conversation that really should be added, who I think has done the best double shifting in maybe all of MMA. Not the best stance switcher necessarily, but the best double shifter. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so how did Jorge Masvidal win? Again, as a standard disclaimer I always make with this, I'm not presenting to you this as the only analysis or the best analysis or the complete analysis. I'm presenting this to you as mine. I encourage you to watch other analysts and see what they have to say and make a determination from there. However, these are my arguments, and I intend to justify them here through the course of this program. All right, number one, whether a first round and collect data. If you notice in this fight, Jorge Masvidal had much more trouble in the first round than he did in the second. There were a couple of reasons for that. One of which is you can see that when he was at opposite angles, so when Darren Till was standing in his traditional southpaw position and you had Jorge Masvidal in his traditional orthodox and they were standing opposite, he had a lot of trouble with that. Jorge Masvidal was always getting out-angled by the lead foot of Darren Till. That's when he got dropped. Remember, he got dropped with that straight left? A lot of times, Darren Till was able to push him back, corral him, and walk him into his left hand, and he landed it pretty effectively through the course of that fight, sometimes with the jab too, or a hook and a straight. That was a real big problem for him. He addressed some of those things in the second round, but the first round was just kind of whether this big welterweight getting right in your face, setting the angle, setting things up. He takes a second to get going. He's not one of these guys who comes out, and yeah, he came out with that jumping front kick, which landed in the groin or whatever, the oblique kick that went to the groin. But generally speaking, the way Jorge Masvidal wins is he has to make reads on you and set traps. You know, I actually spoke to Paulie Malignaggi recently, and he actually made a good point about bare knuckle boxing, which is if you take a boxer, a real boxer, and you put him in the street, which is not, I mean, which I guess is bare knuckle, but not the promotion. His point was the boxer can actually be much more offensive. And the reason why he could be much more offensive is because in a boxing match against someone of relatively equal skill, man, if you're a high-level boxer, you have to set traps. Like, this takes time to unload on it. When there's a skill disparity and they just walk into traps, either you're setting or you don't even have to set because they're so unaccustomed to proper defensive posture and footwork, you can just unload the 4-pounder on them. So when Jorge Masvidal is fighting in these rings, in these cages, I think he understands that really well. He takes time to collect. Yes, he has some first-round stoppages. He should have stopped Cerrone in that first round. They let him out for the second. But generally speaking, he takes a little bit of time to make reads. And Darren Till is interesting because he's a come-forward guy, and he's trying to find his moments, but he's not going crazy with offense either. He's a little bit judicious with it, which makes getting the reads a little bit hard. Then he gets dropped. And then, by the way, his scramble back to his feet, did you guys notice what he did? He reached for a leg, then pulled it on top of him, went for deep half, then used that to get an underhook, and then used that to stand. That was super clever, super clever. Really like that from Jorge Masvidal. Rather than trying to chase the wrestling scramble, he went wrestling, jiu-jitsu, wrestling. It was cool. It was really cool. Anyway, make the reads. So the first round, this is why he's like, you notice why he loses in split decisions? Because he takes time to get going a lot of times, or he'll kind of check out in the third a little bit. He's better, I think, and I know he's lost some 5-round split decisions, but I would say that today's version of Jorge Masvidal is better in a 5-round contest when he can collect enough information and then make judgments about it. 2, neutralize the angle advantage. I talked about it before. Man, that was a real problem for him. That was a real problem. Darren Till, when he was setting up from a southpaw stance for the orthodox of Masvidal, he was constantly getting the superior angle, finding a hook, finding a straight, landing a jab. How did he combat this? In the second round, he would throw lots of kicks to the inside lead leg, to the body, to the teep, an oblique. He would do all of those. He would have much better side-to-side movement. He would go to the weak side a lot, right? So he would circle away from the power hand. He would blitz the pocket. He was just staying busier because as much of a guy he is in terms of taking the time to get going, Darren Till is also, as I mentioned before, a little bit one of those guys too, where he likes to escalate, but he takes a little bit of time to escalate his offensive volume. It's not something that's so necessarily automatic, especially when guys are changing the rhythm, changing the distance on their feet, moving their head side to side, getting off the center line on each different way and sort of figure eighting their way inside. He can often be forced. I think you saw him, for example, in the Tyron Woodley fight, Darren Till, he had 0 punches. Go back and watch what Tyron Woodley was doing, man. The whole time, he's level changing, he's feinting, he's getting side to side, he's circling, he's double shifting, heading in there. And Darren Till couldn't get going. He couldn't get going. He likes it when guys exchange with him. He doesn't like it when guys fake and feint a lot. It slows him down in the process. So as I mentioned, how did he neutralize it? Stance switching, he neutralized it. Kicks to the body, he neutralized it. Kicks to the legs, he neutralized it. The angular movement, he neutralized it. And then a third way he did was collapsing the pocket, which we'll talk about in a second. Counter-striking the warning track. You're going to see there are times when Darren Till pushes forward. He pushes forward to get them to the warning track, and then once they're along the fence line, he pushes forward. He has these 2 phases. The warning track, by the way, is there's the concentric 2 black lines on the sides of the octagon, inside the octagon. It's that outer space, the danger zone I always talk about. Whenever he got pushed back, Jorge Masvidal, that's when he would find a home for the right hand. The same right hand that dropped Till when Woodley fought him. Not exactly the same punch or same setup, but the same idea. And you notice when he got dropped, it was in the same place. Till likes to push guys back there, and he does a lot of good work, but Till does a lot of lean defense. He doesn't move his head a lot, and he kind of goes back in straight lines sometimes too. And so for guys who want to double shift, or for guys who want to time a right hand as they close in, if you're the guy who leans, it's just a lot easier to get caught. It's a lot easier to get caught, and he was taking advantage of some of those deficiencies in that space. As I mentioned, collapse the pocket. He did this over and over again. Sometimes to clinch, he would collapse the pocket and go for a single, but it was a really weak single attempt on purpose. And then he would clinch break and then throw some punches. You saw that. He was just finding ways to get inside. When you think about stance switching in MMA, why is stance switching different than it is in boxing? Right? Well, there's a lot of reasons. And there is stance switching in boxing. There's shifting, drop shifting, all kinds of stuff. But the reality is, a lot of times in boxing, I'm going to be here. Our forearms might be touching. Right? We're going to be right here. And I can switch to southpaw with just a single step because we're going to be fighting in real close, tight ranges. In MMA, you don't really see a lot of that. You don't see phone booth fighting. You don't see 2 guys who are in that space. You see them much further apart. This is where the double shift comes into effect. They have to collapse that pocket. They have to close that distance all the time because you want to be at really safe ranges. You'll notice when TJ Dillashaw fought Cody Garbrandt and he's doing this and he's shifting and all that kind of stuff. What did Cody do? He just circled way out all the time. He only got in trouble when he stayed in the pocket. You see it constantly. That's not something you see a lot of in boxing. Guys can slip, right, and then rotate to get away from a face shifter or, use good ring generalship. It's much harder in MMA because you're starting from so far out, right? Exploit weak side defensive openings. This was the other part I mentioned. Darren Till got dropped with Tyron Woodley's right hand, and I don't know that we have enough data to make a firm conclusion, but he got dropped with a left hand against Jorge Masvidal. When I say firm conclusion, I mean, does Darren Till generally have defensive liabilities on his right-hand side? I can't say for certain. I can say he did in this fight. In this fight, he did. Jorge Masvidal found a home by finishing combinations with his left, and it landed over and over and over and over again. Now, sometimes he went a little long, right? So he would hit him with his forearm. He didn't quite get the distance right. Sometimes it would barely just graze him, right? But the idea was, as I mentioned before, Darren Till does a lot of this. He's not doing a whole lot of, he's not doing a lot of that. He kind of just leans to get out of the way. And, one of the most important parts about footwork is, yes, setting up your offense. But we just mentioned about collapsing the pocket. One of the best ways to not get hit is to move your feet. Till is not one of those guys. And there are advantages and disadvantages to every style. Don't misunderstand me. And I'm certainly in no position to coach him. I'm just saying he saw that when he wants to defend himself, he'll bring his hands up, which is good. He'll lean, which can be good in the right circumstances. But against Jorge Masvidal, who might try a 3-punch combination or at least throw a right and then a left behind it, he was finding a home with that left constantly. And in the end, you see him, he gets Till's hands to extend, and then he goes around the top of it. He just made reads. He just made good reads, right? collect data, force reactions out of this guy, slow him, freeze him with all the fakes, all the feints, move, move, move. Make sure you're kicking him to the body, collapse in that pocket, see how he reacts, and then start making your judgment calls about what kind of things you want to throw. And then lastly, finish off with the double shift. What is the double shift? So a shift is when, so Israel Adesanya, right? What does he do when he, or John Jones, what does he do? He stands in Southpaw, he'll throw a body kick. I'm not really raising my leg up high, but this is the desk right here. But he'll use that, and then he'll step into the new stance when he brings that leg down. That's not really shifting, right? Or Israel Adesanya will do the same thing. He'll bring his leg up real high, like he's going to go for a teep, and then he'll switch in the end. That's not shifting. Shifting is when they literally just, again, you don't want to leave your feet too high, and there's lots of different ways and angles you can do to set it up. You can do it to take a major angle. You can do it to make a lateral push, or excuse me, a linear push. There's lots of different ways, but it's really just a switch of the feet. So you're switching stances, and you're almost jumping in the air, but just a little bit, just enough to switch the feet. A double shift is when you do it back to back. It's how you go from essentially Southpaw to halfway orthodox back to Southpaw like that. It's a double shift. You're making two switches. Southpaw, orthodox, orthodox, Southpaw. Bop, bop, bop. Or orthodox, Southpaw, Southpaw, orthodox, whatever. It's a double shift, right? You saw Darren Till get attacked with one of these by Tyron Woodley. He does it all the time. He flirted with it. You could see in the first round, he stayed mostly in orthodox position. He didn't do a whole lot of switching. He started to experiment with it as the round went on a little bit. He would switch his hips to see what kind of reaction he would get. He would switch and then go back. He might switch once and then throw a shot. And he began to be like, oh, okay. He was making some reads. It was really in the second round, and he ends it with the double shift. I think the speed of the pocket collapse caught him, and the nature of the punch, which I'll show in a minute, also kind of surprised him. But the double shift. And we're going to look at the one Tyron Woodley did, which is, it wasn't very successful. Obviously, he won that fight, but I mean that particular double shift. And then there's somebody else who I think is the best double shifter in MMA because of the ways in which he uses it and the ways in which he kind of disguises a double shift. There's all kinds of stuff that is amazing about him that they should have mentioned on the broadcast, although they did a great job, don't misunderstand me. But when I think about like who the best double shifter is, Tyron Woodley's double shift is very good. Remember what it is. If you make a shift in a fight where you're switching your feet, man, you got to do that with aggression. You got to get in there and make it happen. Now, you got to time it right. You got to set it up. You can't just, berserk out of nowhere. It's a calculated move. My only point is there are some moves you can kind of be sneaky about it, and you can kind of ease your way into it. You can kind of just sort of lull everybody into a moment. Then there are attacks in MMA and boxing and everything else. Man, when you go for it, you got to bite down on the mouthpiece and really commit. The double shift is one of them. It looks like you're, I've got a little dog, Barbas, right? You ever put a little dog on a linoleum floor and they try to run and they run in place for a second, right? And then their paws grip the floor and then they're able to move. It kind of looks like that for a second because you're literally just shifting your feet from one side to the other, and then, in this case, moving forward in a linear fashion while shifting again. Man, you got to commit to that. You got to commit to that. If you do that half-hearted, you're going to get lit on fire. So that's why when you see it, it looks like they're running. That's why it looked like Tyron Woodley was running into Darren Till. And he literally, remember when he did this, he actually landed the right, and then it was the left hand that closed the show. Remember what happened? Till got hit and kind of fell forward a little bit and then ran into Jorge. Jorge got chest to chest with him because he zoomed into that space. Dude, you have to commit to that. And it's exactly what he did. And the proof was in the pudding, obviously, by the end there. All right, let's look at some of the numbers here very, very quickly, as we always like to. Here's Jorge Masvidal's record. The only one I wanted to pay attention to was the striking accuracy, 46%. I don't know if you guys can read that here. Let me do this. Whoop. God damn it. One day I'm going to learn how to use this iPad. Here we go. 46%. So about 50% of his shots that he fires land. All right, that's what we're looking for here. Okay. So here is his fight with Darren Till. What was his overall striking accuracy? As you can see, both of them had 48%. Okay, that sounds about right. That's pretty good. Is there anything else to take from that? Yes, there is. As I mentioned in the first round, here are their first round numbers. In the first round, Jorge Masvidal landed 19 of 39 after a full 5 minutes, right? There you go. After just 3 minutes, he already had 16 of 33. If you do the math, you can tell he was on pace to up his output significantly, even with the percentage of shots landing holding. He was escalating. He collected some data, had to get himself out of a little bit of trouble in that first round, but he was making the reads over time, and as you can see, he was well on his way to producing something of value. If you take a look at that striking percentage against Jake Ellenberger, you can see here, right? Jorge Masvidal, let me do this. You can see here, 44 of 63 with nearly 70%. 70% in terms of significant strike accuracy. Contrast that with, this is the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight. Contrast that with this, 29%. So if he can one of the ways to disrupt him is you got to make him miss a lot, which is perfect for Wonderboy. In retrospect, you can see why Wonderboy has one of those styles that's going to be real trouble for him. If you've got really good defense and he can't quite he has to make contact. He has to hit and then like kind of miss. He's like, okay, let me figure that out. Or like hit and then overshoot and then figure it out. Folks have often asked me what I did in the Marine Corps. I did artillery. I was a forward observer. What is that? I was the guy who would watch the bombs land from a howitzer, which is a cannon. Someone pulls the lanyard, it shoots, red bag 7, 20 or so miles. I'm the Bubba 20 miles up in the front. I've got binoculars. I'm calling in fire missions on enemy in the open, tanks, whatever I need to kill, whatever Uncle Sam's misguided children have deemed no longer worthy of living. And so then I call in that mission, right? Why is that relevant to this? Because the way in which artillery works, people like, oh, you got a direct hit with missiles. You don't really need a direct hit. What you need is something that the Russians invented. The Russians are really the masters of artillery strategy. It's called bracketing. You will actually overshoot one of your initial shots, one of your initial bombs, ahead of the bomb, and then you use the math to recalibrate it on the undershot, and then it's usually your third one that's going to be your best shot. Jorge Masvidal is kind of like that. He might not be intentionally bracketing, but he's bracketing. He's kind of overshooting a little bit, undershooting a little bit, and then like Goldilocks, he finds the porridge that's just right. So there's a concept for you in artillery, bracketing, all right? By the way, if you ever see anyone in the movies on a hook on a Singar saying repeat over, know that they had no military consultation on set, because you would never do that. Repeat means to just keep dropping bombs. That's what it means, all right? All right, let's look at some of this. These are going to go chronologically. So you're going to see him slowly at first do very little, and then it's going to open up, yeah? Here we are at first, 308. This is the same situation. From here, boy, Darren Till was pretty good, I got to be honest. He had some trouble early. Coming out, again, setting that angle. You can see this was, I think, his most comfortable stance, but in terms of how he generally likes to land offense, but it was some problems for him. And by the way, he did a lot of touching to measure and then to disrupt the timing. There's a lot of hand fighting here that I don't really get to. That's a lot. That's really important, but okay. All right, so you can see him watch just the hips watch him here. He's going to jump, switch for a second, see what he does, and then just goes back and then circles back in. Notice that when he switched, he kind of went out a little bit just to see what reaction it caused, but to keep himself safe. And then when you think about how far apart they are, that's where that double shift comes into play, because even just one shift usually isn't enough. Not usually, often is not enough. Not much there, just that, right? And then they reset. Okay, here's about a minute later. Let's watch Jorge Masvidal. He kind of goes lateral, then he goes back to his orthodox stance, right? On the timing, he level changes, comes over, steps forward with the right hand, and then tries to double up. Look at this defense from Darren Till. The head doesn't go this way, it just goes back. So what ends up happening, and you see him do this a lot, we talked about strikes on the same side. A lot of people think you have to go side to side, and you can. It can often be a great option. Sometimes another great option is to go same side. So you'll see what he does is, go back, he's going to put his hands out there, he's going to jab, he's going to wait for Till to do this, and then he's going to come around the same side. Actually, he doesn't jab, he crosses it from a orthodox position cross, which is just to get his hands up or to get the parry, brings it down, and then tries to bring it around. See how he's too short? He's like Russian artillery, bracketing. But this told him where he was short on this one. And by the way, it's a good job by Till to get the hand on the shoulder to prevent it. But that's bracketing, you know? All right. Here we are again. Look where they are. The warning track. This is where he generally would find a good home, well, in this case, I should say, for the right hand. Let's see what he does. He doesn't quite shift, but he stutter steps and comes over the top, and then, boom. And what do you notice? The left hand finds it. What's one of the reasons you might double jab? One of the reasons you might double jab is to get inside. You're having trouble closing the distance. If I single jab, you know, it might set things up or not. It might help me tell me where they are. But if I double jab, now I can take another step in and I can find it. This isn't exactly the same thing, but it is a way of stepping into distance, missing. Look how far away he's missing. But if he keeps it up, as long as he extends and moves his feet faster, he can get that. And he saw it. And this is, you can see, back to the orthodox position. So he goes southpaw a little bit and then orthodox a little bit. Not quite. A little bit. He kind of just brings it level. It's a little bit southpaw, but by the time he throws it, right? Bop, and then whack. So it's not really a stance switch more as it is like a halfway kind of stance switch to get himself closer. But it's that left hand he sees that's landing. It's the left hook that's landing. Finishing those combinations. All right, end of the round here, close to the end of the round, watch Jorge Masvidal, right? So he reacts to a feint, he pulls back, throws the right over the top, and then what does he do? Boom, throws that left hook. It's there every time. Look at the defense of Till. Ha! Every time, man. Every time. Leaning. His feet firmly planted. Right? Again, that's not saying it's wrong. That can be a perfectly... Look at what Silva did against Adesanya. Whoop. You can lean. Leaning's not bad. But there's a time and place for everything. In this particular case, boom. He gets hit with it. And he goes back to where he was. But by the way, look who has the lead foot angle. Till. From this position, he was always maintaining that lead foot position. Always, always, always. It's kind of impressive. Here we are, round 2. Let's watch. Again, southpaw, orthodox. Let's watch the footwork. So he's going to, let's see if he sets up a lane for the punch. All right, brings his hand up. You can see Till go like this, right? Go back and look. See that? Till goes like this, which means you can come around the glove. So that's exactly what he does. He resets. He throws a punch as a setup, switches stance like this, misses with the right, and then misses with the left as well. But here he is collapsing the pocket. This is what I'm talking about with bracketing. He takes too big of a step, so he misses. Plus, I think he wanted to get on the inside of any check hook from Till, so it didn't necessarily work out, but you can see him understanding now, okay, wait a second, if I can shift through, if I can change through, right hand, left hook over the top, I might be able to get something here. And he was marrying it with jab, right hook, left hook, right? He's beginning to put pieces together. Before it was just jab, hook, right? And then before it was kind of hook, hook. Now it's jab, hook, hook. Putting it all together. And he goes back to his stance. And you can see he finished there in southpaw, and he goes back. All right? Here we have southpaw versus southpaw. This is near the end, by the way. What does he do? He kind of feints upstairs, shifts his, not shifts, but stutter steps, goes for the leg, doesn't work. Let's see what happens, all right? And here he's just going to kind of dance on the outside. He kind of goes to southpaw, backs out, orthodox, switches again. That's more like a shift right here. That's a shift. Now, he's not shifting in motion, but that's what the footwork would look like, just like that. That's a shift. See that? And then he just kind of goes back to what he is. So he's, you know, and then look at this timing. He steps, soon as that foot comes up, there he is, right on top of him. Till kind of read it at the last second, but he's mixing up the timing. I'm going to dance on the outside. I'm going to reset. I'm going to re-enter striking range and then get you on the timing. So you saw some good stuff there from Jorge Masvidal. Here we are close to the beginning of the end. Again, Southpaw orthodox, yeah? He's trying to get that angle. Masvidal circles away. Here he is. So similar to the same punch, the thing gets clipped here. It's the right hand. He slips the cross of Till, throws his own right, boom, throws his own left. Again, I don't know if this is a problem he has generally, but he had one in this fight of his right hand being too low. It got him caught over and over and over and over and over again. And by the way, up against the warning track, as I mentioned, when he was in that warning track, if you guys know what the warning track is, if you watch American baseball, it's that last 5 feet or so right before you hit a home run, that space there where you'll see him catch sometimes pretty high fly balls. It's the last area there at the edge of the field. That's what I like to call the warning track here in MMA. It's not really what it's called, it's what I call it. But as you can see, when he was here, he wanted to counter-strike with the right hand, the same punch, or relatively the same kind of punch that Woodley landed, yeah? Boom, caught him. Two-pieced him up there. That was just a two-piece, no soda. All right, here's the beginning of the end. Let's watch this from this angle. You can't quite see it. Switches, or excuse me, shifts but doesn't move, kind of goes back. See, what's the reaction? All right, what's the reaction? He shifts. Hands kind of come down a little bit. Not a whole lot of reaction there. Then he goes to southpaw, sets it up because he knows if I finish with the left here and I get just the distance right, this will be mine. So he lets Till come in a little bit, resets again, uses that to push him back. And what I think he wanted here was for Till to come forward just a little bit, like that. And as you can see, what he's going to do is he's going to fade over until he's created a lane for his left hand. He fades over. Now he's got his lane. You see that? He was kind of here before. Now he's got his lane. And he just jabs. The hands come out of Till. He shifts left. And he was ready to throw the right here, you can see, but Till kind of collapsed in on him. Put the thumbnail up, please. Here's another look at it. Go ahead. So it's blurry, but he's starting from the southpaw position. Right, here he is. He puts the jab out to get the hands out. Look at Till's hands, man. Way out in front. And you can see, look at his feet. Right? Pay attention to the feet of Darren Till. Who's moving their feet faster? Right? And so he catches him here again, hands out. I can catch him with the left if I can fool him with the right. And by the way, when he throws from the shot, he'd only landed this punch like one other time. Most of the time when he had landed the left, it was a left hook. Now he's getting him left straight, or kind of instead of a left hook from a right-handed position, he's getting with a sort of a long overhand. So it's also something of a different look. I don't think he was necessarily anticipating the punch coming from that angle and that particular side in that way. So that kind of got him. Here's another angle on it real quickly. Last one. By the way, Mark Goddard did a great job again as a referee. Southpaw position, blitzing in, hands come out, pow. Just catches him, just quicker. Good setup, good timing, the whole nine. By the way, you want to see the double shifting from Tyron Woodley? Let's take a look at the double shift. Ready? Watch Tyron's feet. All right. One, that's one shift. And he's going to use that shift to drive into the pocket and then shift again like that. See that? There's your shift. So we are orthodox, south, punch, orthodox. Right? Now, I mentioned on the broadcast very quickly, because I know we got to get going. I mentioned very quickly that there's somebody in MMA who's the best double shifter. Dude, I still think Israel Adesanya is the best stance switcher because there's a lot more different things he does. A lot of different things. He is your best double shifter. He's your best shifter generally, right? This guy does so many different things with the shift. It takes a while to understand what he's doing. So watch this. He goes orthodox, right? Watch this. So he shifts at an angle. Cody retreats immediately. And then, watch again. We're here. 1, kind of stutter steps into 2. So he ends up, usually a double shift, you go back to the same one, but because he shifts and then half shifts, he's able to go back to not orthodox, southpaw. That's 1. Here's another one. We're at southpaw. What does he do? He goes and just changes to orthodox. Let's see what he does. Pay attention to TJ Dillashaw here very quickly. He shifts. There's your shift. Whoop. And then he half shifts again and ends up in southpaw. So it's 1. So let's see. 1, 2, and then ends up in southpaw. Bow. All right? There's another one. Let's watch. Here's another shift. Shift, takes the outside angle. Let's see. He goes 1, kind of keeps the same angle and leaps forward, and then shifts again, and then again. Look at this one, man. This is just incredible. 1, 2, 3, 4. And not all those were shifts, but he's playing with stance and angle and distance on all 4 of those. He doesn't do a traditional double shift where you're just coming in straight. He's coming in at angles and curving and everything. Here's another one against John Lineker. So before he was trying to set up strikes against Cody Garbrandt. I know we got to go very quickly. Watch this. So here's your shift, and he half shifts. Look, he's in orthodox, right? He shifts, takes a half shift, and then goes to southpaw to get the wraparound double. One more of these. Ready? One more time. He's going to circle to his left. He's in southpaw. He's going to go orthodox, shift, but like a stutter step to then get into that to the double. So he can go shift, half, stance switch, shift, 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 half, shift, shift. He can do all different kinds of stuff. Head kicks, punches, takedowns, left-handed stance, right-handed stance. Where they all come from, you can put the thumbnail back up. All that kind of stuff. It's that kind of thing. The one last point, because I know we have to get to our next guest. Here's the point I wanted to make. They say something in American football. They call the NFL a copycat league, where one year you'll have a team be very successful running a certain kind of offensive scheme. The next year you'll see 2 things. One, you'll see defenses kind of adapt to it a little bit, but you'll see other teams trying to take that success and borrow it for themselves. And eventually everyone just kind of figures everyone out, and then a new adaptation happens. Now, I'm not saying that Tyron Woodley stole it from TJ Dillashaw. I'm not saying that Jorge Masvidal took it from Tyron Woodley. I don't know who got what from who or how long they've known it. But here's what I am noticing. You're seeing more and more of this. I think guys, even when they know it, if I see TJ Dillashaw out there doing it and I'm a fighter, I could say, oh, I'm not TJ Dillashaw, but I should feel more comfortable trying my offensive weapons against some of these guys. You're seeing much more of that these days. It's actually pretty impressive. So the double shift is interesting, but here's the deal. Whether it's a 2-piece and a biscuit, a 3-piece and a soda, don't let the crazier things that happen in Jorge Masvidal's life and the other things he comes from to trick you. That is part of who he is, no doubt about it. I don't want to take that from him. But don't take the fact that he is cerebral and smart and capable, and look at the other names I'm showing you and the things that those guys can do. Champion Tyron Woodley, champion TJ Dillashaw. Is Jorge Masvidal going to be a champion? I don't know. Here's what I do know. He fights just like one. That's the Monday Morning Analyst.